Radio New Zealand International Pacific Regional News. I'm Don Wiseman. Nauru's Chief Justice, Geoffrey Eames, says allegations of cronyism and political interference made by the Nauru government are offensive and disgusting. Mr. Eames, who lives in Australia, is unable to enter Nauru after the government last month cancelled his visa. So reported officials, including the resident magistrate. The Home Affairs Minister, Charmaine Scotty, says they acted because of cronyism among the expatriates at the top of the Nauru Public Service, because Mr. Eames overruled government attempts to institute states of emergency. Mr. Eames says he's ruled against government constitutional breaches, but that is what judges do.
And that's what independent judges do. They make decisions and publish their reasons. Governments often don't like what judges do, but that's the rule of law. If Mrs. Scotty would like to identify any cases where I have not followed those principles of the rule of law, I'd be very interested to hear them.
Geoffrey Eames. Amnesty International is urging New Zealand's Foreign Minister Murray McCully to put human rights on the agenda during his diplomatic visit to Fiji. Mr. McCully and Australia's Foreign Minister Julie Bishop will be in Fiji from tomorrow as part of the Pacific Island Forum's Ministerial Contact Group. During the two-day visit, the delegation will meet a range of groups and Fiji government representatives to produce a report updating forum leaders on election developments. Amnesty's Fiji campaigner Michael Hayworth says the minister should take the opportunity to raise critical issues, such as Fiji's restrictions on freedom of expression.
In the lead up to elections, we're seeing a crackdown on free speech, we're seeing people not being able to protest, and we're of course seeing people not being able to join trade unions or non-government organisations. Fiji really needs to take a U-turn on these human rights abuses, and the Australian and New Zealand governments need to play a role in that by raising the issues with their counterparts.
Amnesty Fiji's campaigner Michael Hayworth. The Premier of Solomon Islands' Renville Province, Lenci Tango, says he will not return to his provincial headquarters on Renville Island while security personnel, allegedly hired by a logging company, remain there. He says he fears for his safety and the stability of his provincial government. Mr. Tango claims a logging company operating on West Renville, which has had its operations stopped by the provincial government, is employing the security guards. Mr. Tango says the Malaysian logging company, Samlamson Limited, has hired the guards to not only provide security for its logging equipment, but also destabilise his government and to intimidate him. He says he intends staying in Honiara until the security men leave his province. Mr. Tango says requests for police to step in have been ignored. The head of public health in Kiribati says he believes the dengue outbreak in Kiribati is finished for now, despite some people still presenting with fever. Dr. Piotau Sira says more than 100 cases of dengue appeared over December and January. A test on patients with high temperatures indicates a normal influenza-type illness. He says the dengue strain detected this season is the same found in French Polynesia and New Caledonia. Dr. Sira says he believes it started in Fiji. He says dengue is nothing new in Kiribati and it may well return soon as it's raining again this week.
We had the mosquito. It's only that when someone is infected comes into the country, then that's when the spread comes. So there's nothing that surprises us. We expected that. After the rainfall, we expect that we prepare ourselves for dengue outbreak and all the other. This is related to rainfall.
But as Sira says no one has died from dengue in Kiribati, and he keeps in contact with the WHO for advice on precautions and surveillance. A Salvadoran man who drifted to the Marshall Islands says several ships passed by during his ordeal, but they ignored his cries for help. This was revealed by El Salvador's health minister, Maria Isabel Rodriguez, who's spoken to Jose Salvador Alvarengo after his return to San Salvador, where he's in hospital care. He had drifted for 13 months from Mexico, arriving in the Marshall Islands last month. The minister says, according to Mr. Alvarengo's account, several boats passed by during his ordeal, including some close to him. He says one ship's crew waved back at him, but did not stop to help. In a short video released by the Health Ministry, Mr. Alvarengo said from his hospital bed that he was doing well, but pleaded with journalists who had been following his every move since he returned home to leave him alone. The Fiji government has accused the Labour Party of incessantly lying about the state of Fiji's economy. Labour's leader, Mahendra Chaudhry, recently said the regime was handling the country's finances poorly. Now, Fiji's economy only ever did well under a Labour-led government in 1999. But the Attorney General, Ayasad Kayam, has told FBC News that this is wrong because Labour only came to power in March of 1999 when the economy was bouncing back from a cyclone the year before.
Almost 4 months had already passed, so you cannot necessarily claim total credit for what had actually happened. And you know, this is a kind of lack of integrity in the analysis that many of these politicians throw out in the public space. Absolutely no credibility. They just pick and choose which figure suits them.
Ayasad Kayam says Fiji has seen consistent growth over the past 4 years under the Bainimarama government. A publisher in French Polynesia says the territory's tourism sector is suffering because of French-style management, or French-style management is smothering its personality. A new report by the Court of Auditors in Paris says the French Polynesian tourism sector is in crisis because of a lack of professionalism, a failure to implement a long-term strategy, and high travel costs. The publisher of the Tahiti Pacific Monthly, Alex Duprel, says a number of hotel chains were built in the early 2000s because of a tax write-off. He says the hotel managers were imported from France and did not understand Tahitian culture, tainting the tourist experience. Mr. Duprel says another mistake has been managing the country's tourism sector from Paris.
It was only last year that the first time the president from Tahiti went to Hawaii to see how they're doing tourism. Before that, it was always to Paris. Well, the tourism in France has nothing to do with tourism on tropical islands.
Alex Duprel. The most ambitious study ever undertaken on the island group of the Butlers in Tonga is expected to reveal much more about the plants and animals of the archipelago. A team of biologists is just embarking on a mission to conduct biodiversity and ecological assessments of land and marine sites. It's a collaboration between the Tonga government and the Secretariat of the Pacific Regional Environment Program. Bruce Jeffries from SPREP says the ultimate goal is to add to Tonga's protected area network. Mr. Jeffries says they'll also be looking at a marine special planning approach for the archipelago, a practice being used more and more in Pacific Islands.
Not just put protected areas in place, but look at zoning areas for no-take fisheries, zoning areas for community-based fisheries, some for commercial fisheries, and just some for tourism, of course, which is important here. So that whole suite of activities that take place now in the marine environment.
Bruce Jeffries, the expedition wraps up at the end of this month. Australia has appointed Martin Quinn as the next High Commissioner to Nauru. The Foreign Minister, Julie Bishop, says Mr. Quinn has previously served as ambassador to Afghanistan. Ms. Bishop has also announced a new High Commissioner to Samoa. The post will be taken by Sue Langford. Ms. Bishop says Australia enjoys strong people-to-people links with Nauru and Samoa. And that's a bulletin of Pacific Regional News from Radio New Zealand International.
Hello, Vanaka. This is Dateline Pacific from Radio New Zealand International. I'm Amelia Langford. Today, the Nauru opposition says claims of cronyism in the judiciary are ridiculous. The number of dengue cases continue to grow. Solomon Islands launches an electronic civil registration system. Bougainville is just weeks away from having its own public service. And a New Zealand opposition MP says a report shows a bleak future for young Pacifica. Opposition MP says claims by the island's Home Affairs Minister that cronyism has hampered the judicial sector, and this is why key officials have been removed, is ridiculous. Last month, the resident magistrate was deported, and Australian domiciled Chief Justice was denied a visa. Other leading officials have also been deported, prompting international criticism, with New Zealand Green Party MP Jan Logie saying the country was descending into chaos. The Nauru Law Society has called the deportations illegal. The Nauru government has also lifted visas for journalists by nearly 4,000%. The New Zealand government is a major contributor to the law and justice sector on Nauru, and after a visit to Wellington this week to explain the controversial moves, Home Affairs Minister Charmaine Scotty says cronyism was a motivation for the government to act. She claims the senior expatriates at the top of the Nauru bureaucracy tended to look after themselves, and the government wants a fairer system. But MP Roland Kuhn says the cronyism claims have no basis.
There's no such thing as cronyism. The Chief Justice was appointed through a due process, and she has to pinpoint, if she's going to accuse the Chief Justice of cronyism, actually pinpoint to what she's referring to. We've challenged them to do exactly that in Parliament, in the last Parliament sitting, and they have failed to do so, and they continue to fail to do so. They're just coming up with all sorts of things because they just don't have any explanation for their lack of regard for rule of law and no rule.
With these talks in New Zealand, the call from New Zealand is that the aid it provides to the justice sector will continue, but it wants to see changes, wants to see more transparency in the way in which the whole sector's operated, the way in which employment is handled and this sort of thing. Do you think that will happen?
Not under the current government, because you must realise that the same Minister for Justice who is sitting now was the same Minister for Justice who has sacked two Secretary for Justice. In the past, is the same Minister for Justice who moved to remove the Commissioner of Police earlier on, the Parliamentary Council earlier on, and now the Minister for Justice is behind the removal of resident magistrates and not allowing Chief Justice to return on island as required. Chief Justice can only be removed by 2/3 of Parliament. They don't have that number, which is why they're doing what they're doing now, and it's just a direct attack against judiciary of no.
With regard to journalists and this visa that's been put in place, we've had Charmaine Scotty previously saying, well, media organisations can afford it, and of course the reality is they can't, and it would shut out all journalists from ever going to Nauru. She says, well, if they apply to the government approves you, then you can come and you don't have to pay the fee. You don't have to pay the fee at all. So she's suggesting they're going to waive this visa for some. What do you think of that?
Well, the whole idea is ridiculous. Earlier on, she was saying that it's a revenue-generating measure, and obviously that's wrong. You don't look at the media and the ability of media to report on matters as a revenue-generating measure for government. She clearly just doesn't understand the role of media in a democratic system and why they should be facilitated and not hindered by any government. And that just comes to show the level of ignorance in the government in the way they're handling everything.
What do you make of this being prepared to let some in and presumably not others?
Well, the whole thing is highly questionable already. Like, obviously that is wrong. They'll be just selecting the people who say exactly what they want them to say, and they'll be not allowing any other people in who may see things differently to the way they want things to be seen. So that's just ridiculous. And in any case, I'm not sure whether they've actually properly regulated the fees that they're purporting to have introduced. There's legal steps that they need to take in order that these fees become legal, but I question whether they've done even that.
That's MP Roland Kuhn. The Secretariat of the Pacific Community says the region is facing exceptional pressure from mosquito-borne diseases. The Deputy Director of the Public Health Division, Dr. Ivan Suarez, says the number of cases of dengue is still growing in Fiji, and about 2,000 people in Yap and the Federated States of Micronesia have chikungunya. He told Jenny Meyer the most worrying is the Zika virus, which is also spread by mosquito, having infected close to 40,000 people in French Polynesia.
The SPC's Dr. Yvonne Suarez says the burden of the three current epidemics could easily overwhelm health services, and the rainy season is not over yet.
We observed an unusual number of outbreaks throughout the region. 11 outbreaks of dengue, 3 outbreaks of chikungunya, 2 outbreaks of Zika in 13 months. That is unprecedented. However, we were not caught by surprise because we're following global health very closely, monitoring what's going on.
Dr. Yvonne Suarez says the SPC was expecting that sooner rather than later the Pacific would get the pressure from what has been happening in Southeast Asia, China and other parts of the world. The World Health Organization is warning there may still be spikes in the number of cases of dengue fever in the Pacific this season before the weather starts to cool in April. The head of emerging disease surveillance and response at WHO in Fiji says people with conditions such as diabetes, heart disease, blood disorders, kidney or liver problems are at higher risk of developing more severe dengue symptoms. Dr. Eric Niles says the ease of international travel is driving the spread of arboviruses like dengue, which is transmitted between people by mosquitoes. He says the dengue season is characterised by hot, wet weather and normally runs from December to April or May.
Yes,
the tail end of a dengue outbreak in the Solomon Islands. There's still some dengue cases being reported in Micronesia, and again the tail end of an outbreak. And then there's a larger number of cases being reported in Kiribati, in French Polynesia, in New Caledonia, and Fiji and Vanuatu.
Dr. Nunes says the surveillance network for dengue-like illnesses is robust, with 23 nations reporting case numbers on a weekly basis. The head of public health in Kiribati says he believes the dengue outbreak in Kiribati has finished for now, despite some people still presenting with fever. Dr. Peto Tera says more than 100 cases of dengue appeared over December and January, but tests on those with high temperatures now indicate a normal influenza-type illness. He says the dengue strain detected this season was the same as that in French Polynesia and New Caledonia, and he believes it started in Fiji. He says dengue is nothing new in Kiribati, but it may return as it is raining again this week.
Near the mosquito. It's only that when someone got infected comes into the country, then that's when the spread comes. So there's nothing that surprises us. We expected that. After the rainfalls, we expect that we prepare ourselves for dengue outbreak and we'll be at a diseases related to rainfall.
Dr. Tera says no one has died from dengue in Kiribati, and he keeps in contact with the WHO for advice on precautions and surveillance. An Australian professor in tropical medicine and infectious diseases, James McCarthy, says there are some promising developments with dengue vaccine research.
There was a very big trial that was published last year which suggested that we will have a dengue vaccine, but it's nowhere near deployment. And always the issue with these tools is that someone's got to pay for their use in poor countries where the health system can't afford a vaccine that costs $100 for every person who gets it.
Professor James McCarthy says there's a strong possibility climate change will lead to higher prevalence of arboviruses in more temperate zones. This is Jenny Meyer.
The United Nations Child Protection Agency, UNICEF, says Solomon Islands' move to an electronic civil registration system is a significant step forward for the country. The new system was officially launched in Honiara last week and provides a more secure way to store records, including births, deaths and name changes. UNICEF's Chief of Child Protection, Amanda Bissix, says Solomon Islands is estimated to have the lowest rate of birth registration in the Pacific. Ms. Bissix told me the new database will be far superior to the old paper-based registration.
This way with an electronic database, there's more security of data, it's easier to retrieve the data. If somebody loses their birth certificate, for example, previously you had to go to the forester office and they had to try and locate documentation. Often they couldn't. You'd have to pay for the issuing of a new birth certificate. But now with the electronic system, if you lose your documentation, it will all be there within the database. So it much improves the system for securing data and also in terms of access for the public to their data.
And I understand that the Solomon Islands has a very low rate at the moment of registering births. Is that right?
It does. In 2007, UNICEF supported an assessment in Solomon Islands, and we found that they had less than 1% of all births were formally registered. Since that time, we've been working in 4 areas, Honiara and 3 provinces, and piloting a system of decentralizing birth registration and working with the health system. And in those areas, we estimate coverage has increased to at least 20% for children under 5. But until now, because there hasn't been an electronic database, it's been impossible to verify what the coverage rates are. So an added benefit now actually of having the electronic system is that we can verify what the birth registration coverage rate is.
And going to this new electronic system, will that benefit child protection agencies in terms of looking after children? How will that help?
I think it helps in a number of ways. I think, we always say a child's birth registration is sort of their first right to have their identity registered and recognised by the government. So it helps in a number of ways because in some cases accessing services will become easier. When a child is young, that's not such an issue, but as they get older, they need to access health services or education services. Later in life, maybe they want to travel and they need a passport, bank accounts, but also establishing the lineage with the family and being able to say, yes, I am a member of this family. It's important for inheritance rights, especially in Solomon Islands and land issues, to be able to prove that you're part of an extended family network is very important. So it has a very individual, personal impact on protecting children and making sure they can access their rights.
That's UNICEF's Chief of Child Protection, Amanda Bissix. The government in the autonomous Papua New Guinea province of Bougainville is next month due to pass its ABG Public Service Management and Administration Bill. It will allow the establishment of a public service bureaucracy that reports to the Bougainville government rather than Waigani in Port Moresby. The Bougainville Chief Administrator, Chris Seriosi, says it's a key development in moving the province forward on its autonomy arrangements. Mr. Seriosi told Don Wiseman the change will require senior personnel to step up and accept more responsibility.
There will be this need for heads of government departments here to not only be worried about implementation now, after the law is passed, but the increased responsibility will mean exercising authority to pass policies of government. That's an increased responsibility from what we currently have.
Do you expect the public service to get a lot bigger?
There will be a significant growth in the size of the public service in Bougainville.
Just how big do you think it will become, bureaucracy in Bougainville?
From what we have now, a number of about 600, I'm looking at about between 800 and 1,000 public servants.
And do you think of that 600 you have at the moment, with the reorganisation, people will return to other parts or move to other parts of PNG and there'll be more jobs for local people?
We will be selecting people on merit, regardless of where they come from. We want to attract the best candidates to take up positions in the public service, and location or where they come from is not a factor.
And wages will be higher than they are now?
I think in terms of the layer, the executive management level, it will need to be higher because that is where the effect of autonomy will be felt.
How important is this reorganisation or establishment of the bureaucracy for Bougainville? Is it a critical move in your view?
As far as I'm concerned, it is the key element that we have to undertake in order to really move forward with implementation of the autonomy arrangements. So the government here will have the authority to establish offices or branches of departments as and when new functions are drawn down. So it's a very significant step. It's a very important step in the history of the implementation of autonomy in Bougainville.
And the legislation you expect to go through the ABG next month, so will we start to see changes by April? How soon before you'll be able to start implementing the changes?
I want to start implementing the changes as soon as the law is passed. On the day the law is passed, I will issue instructions to public servants in Bougainville to decide whether they wish to remain with the National Public Service or they wish to become members of the new Bougainville Public Service. That will signal the cut-off date when Bougainville will roll out its own salaries from within Bougainville. We have already set up the payroll system here, and so when the law is passed, first payroll, soon after the law is passed, will be rolled out from Bougainville instead of Waigani. I want to put in place measures to enable that to take place.
Bougainville's Chief Administrator, Chris Seriosi. A New Zealand opposition MP, William Seald, says young Pacific Island people have a bleak future in the country. He says a new report by the Salvation Army shows young Pacific people are lagging even further behind since the national-led government came to power in 2008. Mr. Seald, who's the spokesperson for the Labour Party on Pacific Island affairs, told Sally Round the report reveals what he calls the awful truth about Pacific unemployment in New Zealand.
Everybody's been celebrating the fact that the economy is recovering and that there's been a drop in the unemployment figures. But the reality for Pacific communities and Māori is that we're not celebrating at all, that there's still quite a bit of suffering and huge numbers who are not feeling that recovery whatsoever. Despite some minor improvements in the figures, the reality is for Pacific, and particularly the young people, it's still huge numbers. We're talking about 24% unemployed, ages 15 to 19. And for Pacific, it's even worse. Despite the fact that we've got a growing population and more going into the workforce,
they're not in jobs.
How bad is it in your constituency, for example? What are you seeing, and what are those kids doing?
That's the sad thing about it. Every day we're getting families coming through our doors who are just struggling to make ends meet. But you're talking about communities who are very proud and don't want to be tagged as poor, despite the struggles that they're encountering. They're not going on the dole, and that's not because they don't need that support. It's they're relying on their own, on brothers and sisters or sons and daughters working in Australia.
But things are improving, aren't they? The unemployment rate for Pacific people in New Zealand is down from 16% a year before, down to 13.7%. So things are on the improve, aren't they?
Yeah, but it's still at 13.7%. That's just unacceptable. In 2008, it was about what mainstream unemployment is at the moment. It was a single figure. So we're at 13.7%. It was a drop from 16. That's more than the size of that population. Despite calling ourselves Pacific peoples, we are an integral part of the New Zealand society.
But there must be something going right in terms of government policies if there has been quite a substantial drop there.
I wouldn't call that a substantial drop at all. I think that masks there's some hidden figures of people who are long-term unemployed. It also masks the fact that these are not full-time, quality, high-earning jobs. These are mainly casual part-time jobs and low-paid at that.
One of the other things the report brought up does refer to the Pacific Island proportion of the prison population hitting a new record at 11.6% of the prison muster, when for other groups it's a fairly stable prison population. What does that say to you?
Well, look, I mean, I think we've always learned in our communities in past economic downturns that these are sort of the symptoms of high unemployment, low wages, where families just can't cope. And that's what you often see if young people aren't in jobs and they're not getting supported into education. Sadly, that's what happens to those prison figures. They tend to increase.
There was a New Zealand opposition MP, Sir William Seo. And that's Dateline Pacific from Radio New Zealand International. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm Amelia Langford. Hold on. This is Eva Lancome, a voice of the Pacific on the Voice of the Pacific, Radio New Zealand International.